Okay, you're live.
Alrighty, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wordfence Office Hours. Today is August 11th, 2020, and we got a good bit of stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about the new WordPress 5.5 release coming out, so stay tuned for that. We're going to cover all the features and all the changes that you can expect to see there. And we'll get everything going here in just a few moments. Give everybody a couple minutes to join up and get settled in here. My name is Scott Miller, and I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence. And in a few moments, I'm going to be joined by threat analyst Chloe Chamberlain and QA engineer and threat analyst Ram Gall. We're going to take a look at WordPress 5.5. Let me know in the chat. I see we got a good bit of activity here. Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. Let us know where you're viewing from as well. And if perhaps this is your first time joining us live on Office Hours, we're happy that you're here. Maybe this is not your first time. Let us know if you've been here a bunch and been coming each week and hanging out with us. We started doing this about 3 months ago or so, maybe longer. Once we haven't been able to get out to WordCamps, so we've been trying to find a way to interact with security-minded people and people who love WordPress and using Wordfence, and that's where we came up with Office Hours, and we're happy to be able to come on here each week and interact with everybody and get some good questions and hang out. So we really appreciate it. I'm broadcasting live here from just south of Pittsburgh, where it's a little bit cloudy. It might rain, so let us know where you're at. Hopefully it's nice. I see some first timers in the chat, so welcome. We've got Paris and India. Welcome to Office Hours. So we're happy that you're joining us. So if you haven't seen Office Hours previously, you can catch up on the episodes here on our YouTube channel. And we have quite a handful of them. Early on, we did a lot of walkthrough and setups for different features in Wordfence. And if you're just getting started with Wordfence, or you're looking to lock your site down a little more, those would be good episodes to take a look at, because we go through setting up login security and brute force protection, lots of free features. So if you're using the free plugins still, there can still be a lot of helpful videos on there. And also Kathy Zant narrates some different walkthrough videos on the YouTube channel as well. So definitely check that out if you're looking to get set up and really lock your site down. Some of our newer episodes of Office Hours, our live streams recently, we've done some vulnerability walkthroughs on stream here, and Chloe and Ram will show how these plugins and these vulnerabilities are compromised in real time, and it's really cool. It's cool to see it happen and see what a small vulnerability on your site, or not updating a plugin, or if you don't have security on the site, what can happen there. So check those out. A few weeks ago, we also did a complete site audit and just showed you some things to look at on your site to really boost your security and make sure that you're in a good standing there. Today, we're going to be talking about the WordPress 5.5 release, which should be coming soon today, if it is on schedule, and the features that it's adding to the sites and the default changes that it's making. Those are things that we're going to go over. The big one that we're going to discuss is automatic updates to plugins and themes. And Chloe and Ram will be diving into that one, so everybody can understand, what this means for you, depending on what kind of site you're running. If you're running a hobby blog, maybe a small store, or if you have a bigger business, we're going to go over some different scenarios there for you. Now, as I mentioned, we're broadcasting from Zoom to YouTube here, so this is a public forum. We ask that you don't put anything too sensitive or anything personal in the chat. We'll be doing our best to moderate comments, but these are visible after the fact on YouTube here on the channel. So we ask that if you have anything personal for your site, rather than posting your email or anything personal like that, you can send us an email directly at feedback@wordfence.com and use the subject line Wordfence Office Hours, and it'll catch our eye and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We usually get back quite quickly for those when we see them in the queue. If you're new here, and I see we got a lot of people that are mentioning they've seen some episodes, so we appreciate that. If you're new perhaps to Wordfence or WordPress, WordPress is powering around 35% of the web now. And there's over 50,000 plugins in the repository. And, it makes it a target for bots and hackers. And that's what makes security so important here. And WordPress or Wordfence rather, is here to help with that and empower you to stay secure and keep your site secure online. Now, since you're here, you likely know that Wordfence is a security plugin, and we're on the WordPress.org repository. That means you can download Wordfence at wordpress.org/plugins or from the plugins section of your site. And WordPress, if you check out Wordfence on the WordPress repository, you'll see we got a lot of good reviews. We're one of the most popular security plugins out there for WordPress. So if you're not using security right now, or if you're not using Wordfence, definitely give the free version a look. There are a lot of features in there. So if you're subscribed to the mailing list, you know how hard the team is working right now to find vulnerabilities and get some firewall rules and signatures out there to protect. And you've probably been getting some emails or checking the blog and seeing how active we've been, and a lot of that's Chloe and Ram doing a lot of good work to protect our sites. So not long after we find these vulnerabilities, we make sure to get out malware signatures and rules for the firewall to protect your site as quickly as possible. And these are initially sent out to our premium subscribers. And then for free users, we get them out 30 days later. So if you're not subscribed to the mailing list, that's a good thing to do, especially if you're a free user, because you'll likely hear from us first about new vulnerabilities, and that gives you the chance to get over there and update it on your site and keep yourself protected. If you're a premium user, then the firewall rules that we put out should keep you protected from the vulnerabilities in the meantime until you can get that updated. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the premium features a little later on in the show, in between our WordPress 5.5 update talk. But in the meantime, as I mentioned, Chloe and Ram are going to be joining me. So let's bring them in. Chloe, Ram.
Hi.
What's up? What's up, Ram? How's it going over there?
It is another beautiful and entirely too hot day in Phoenix.
I'm a little jealous of the heat. We're a little rainy here. You would probably welcome that, I assume, though.
So I've heard.
What's up, Chloe? How's it going?
That's good. It's hot here too, but probably more on the humid side. Yeah.
I'm guessing that you're itching to get out onto a boat or a plane here soon and get out and about.
Yeah, I really miss it. Went RVing over the weekend though, so that was fun.
That's a start.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, a road trip wouldn't be out of the question, but yeah, I'm too lazy to drive anywhere, long like that. So I'm skipping it for now. I'm gonna wait. I'm holding out for a WordCamp. I think all of us are, though. Yes. So we'll get there soon. We'll all be fighting over the first couple WordCamps. Yeah. So maybe I'll sit the first one out and let the dust clear after that. So what are you going to go over later today, Chloe?
I will be talking about a couple different scenarios where you might want to enable auto updates or not enable auto updates, and give you a little bit of guidance on which actions you should take based on your site's persona.
That sounds good. How about you, Ram?
I'm going to go over when the auto updates are rolling out, why they were added, what the benefits are, potential drawbacks, what could go wrong, since there are some things that could go wrong. And Chloe will kind of cover, which situations it's worth the risk and which ones it isn't worth the risk. So
Mark says in the chat that we have WordCamp 2030 to look forward to. So
WordCamp 2030.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little screen share here. And what I'm going to do is just show the changes that we're going to see for WordPress 5.5 to the block editor. And these are going to be some UI changes that you might notice depending on how much you use this. So let me see if I can share that. Can you see that, Chloe, Ram?
Yep.
I can.
Alrighty, so I have a little test post already ready to go here. Just a little header here and then a list, and I got an image in. Imaging is one of the things that I have noticed, and admittedly I have not used the block editor a lot prior to this, but over the past few days, just going over the 5.5 editor and changes and what I was using previously, which was 5.4.2, I had noticed that the new update does seem a little more fluid and easy to move about. So I'm sure a lot of people here in chat are probably used to using the previous version here, and they're probably, if you used it a lot, you're going to be noticing some difference here with the UI. So one of the first things that you might be seeing are larger and different icons here. And one of the things that stood out to me is the way that you can move these blocks around, and it's a little easier to navigate. Now what I have down here is the older version from 5.4.2, and I believe this is just about to scale here. So as you can see, the icons and the UI is a little bit smaller, and it can be a little difficult. I was finding it a little bit finicky whenever I was using that older version after switching to 5.5 over the past few days. So there's the focus on the UI and the outline. It really makes things easier to interact with, and that's one of the things that they had spent time on. It's easy to move things about here, and that's another thing that they had mentioned in the update. You can drag things about just by holding the movement arrows here. Now, if you notice previously, the movement icons were sort of hanging off the side, and it was just a little bit awkward, it felt. So that is one of the more noticeable changes that you're going to see with the block editor there. Now also, they have introduced the block directory, and you can access this from the search or when you search for different blocks. If you don't find a default block, such as a list or a header or a paragraph, then you'll be given the option to look at different blocks and potentially install them. So to get to that area, it's similar as it was previously. You can hit the plus sign here, and you'll notice that the browse all, I do not believe was there previously. So if you hit that, it's going to open up a panel here on the left, and you can also open that up immediately by hitting this plus sign up here. And once you do that, you'll notice that our search gives us the default blocks whenever you search them. But if you search for something that is not a default block, you do have the ability, as I mentioned, from the directory to search and install those. So if you're using WooCommerce or a different plugin like Yoast, you do have the ability to add and install those blocks and then use them right here. Another change you're going to notice if you use this frequently are the block patterns, and these are pre-built blocks that have recommended or common settings already built in that you can just add right in. And this is these are cool. There's not many of them right now, but this is something they are going to continue to add to. But if you're building a page or a post, these patterns, they have some useful features in them, and I messed around with them a little bit yesterday. The buttons are quite easy, so if you add these in, there's lots of things that you can change on the fly here, and it's just click, it's drag and drop pretty much to get these going. So adding buttons is quite easy, and they're easy to edit as well. So the changes there with the new UI definitely to me seem a little easier to use, and that's somebody who hasn't used the previous one very much. So I'll be curious to see in chat what you think about what you're seeing with these changes here, and if you like them or not. I think the UI is definitely a nice change. So also included is inline image editing. So this gives you the ability to scale and crop and rotate right from the interface, as well as resize, which you could also do before without needing to move anywhere. So as you can see, you don't have to waste too much time doing this. And if you run something with a lot of images, if your page has made up primarily of images, or you're always using images in post, this is pretty easy to use, and I think that's pretty good functionality there. Now let's also take a look at some of the other changes here. Now this is a big one, the security. That's what we're going to take a look at for the remainder of the show. But first, the speed and search aspects that were added. So for the search, we have XML sitemaps that have been added by default. Now, typically web crawlers, they don't have an issue discovering pages or from links within your site or from other sites. However, these sitemaps, they allow crawlers to more easily identify URLs included in a sitemap and learn more about the URLs using the associated metadata. So this is something that's going to be enabled by default. And if you're using Yoast or another SEO plugin that you build sitemap for, you don't have to worry, this will not interfere. You can, however, check out your site domain /wp-sitemap.xml, and you'll see the sitemap that's generated there by WordPress. Also included, and this is a cool feature, is the lazy loaded images. So what happens here is whenever you load a page or whenever your visitors load your page, if you have a big image here at the top, since it's in the browser window, your users will see that loaded immediately, just like they normally would. However, images towards the bottom of the page, they're not going to load immediately until you start scrolling down to that. And that's going to have an effect on bandwidth. It's going to affect your site speed. And these changes are going to be good changes for that. And it should make a difference in performance there. So that's a cool one to look at. Now, one thing to take note of with this is I believe that currently, at the time, it is not going to be compatible with Safari, though other major browsers there is compatibility for. Now, the security auto updates for plugins and themes, that's what we're going to look at here in just a moment, and that's a big one in our opinion. So stay tuned for that. But before we get over to that, just some things. We got some bundled libraries that are being updated here, and you can take a look at those here, as well as PHP Mailer is getting an update and is bundled in. Dash-icons, quite a few added there. And these are primarily for developers. So if you're interested in that, take a look at this page or the field guide for WordPress 5.5, which you can access there. Okay, so I think we are now going to get an idea of how auto updates work and why they have been added into WordPress in 5.5. Does that sound right, Ram?
That sounds correct. So the auto updates are coming in 5.5, which is scheduled to be released sometime in the next few hours if all goes as planned. Now, as to why they finally decided to get around to setting up auto updates, it's because WordPress 5.1 introduced fatal error protection. Basically, what that means is if something goes wrong on your site with a plugin or theme, and it causes a fatal error on your site, the site no longer completely crashes. Instead, it sends an email to the administrator telling them about the issue. If you're the administrator, you can log in with that crashed plugin or theme disabled and troubleshoot the issue. And this gave the WordPress core team enough confidence to introduce automatic updates. Now, automatic updates do have some security implications. For one thing, for most people might not actually log into their site or update their plugins or themes very often. And if this is you, then it's probably worth it to have auto updates turned on, because the risk of your site being hacked because you're running a vulnerable plugin or theme is much higher than the risk of an automatic update causing a site failure, especially since the fatal error protection is in place. Now I am going to demonstrate how to turn the automatic updates on or off. There is one thing to be aware of, and that is that automatic updates run twice a day, but because they run using WordPress cron, if your site gets absolutely no traffic, no hits whatsoever, the cron might not actually run until the next time your site actually gets a hit. Though that's fairly rare, most sites will get at least one hit every 12 hours, even if it's just, a Google search bot. So without further ado, here is a site running WordPress 5.5 release candidate 3, which is the basically the testing version that we've been using to make sure that everything works as planned with our own plugin. If I go to the plugins menu, you'll see all these different plugins. Over here on the right, there's an enable automatic updates. Clicking that turns the automatic update on. Let's switch to disable automatic updates. Clicking that will turn the automatic updates off. It's really quite simple and user-friendly. And one thing to remember is that by default, automatic updates are turned off. So this is something you will have to manually turn on if you want to use it, which is possibly for the best, considering that it's a brand new feature. And it's always good to get some real world testing before actually using a brand new feature, which is actually kind of the point of the automatic update content we're going to tell you later. Anyways, I think something that needs to be discussed is the potential pitfalls of automatic updating. So I do QA work for Wordfence, and I have seen a lot of ways in which things can fail. That's kind of the point of doing QA work. And automatic updates are something that can fail. For instance, if you have multiple plugins that are set to update at the same time, and you are running hosting with not a lot of resources, maybe it's got a fairly low memory limit, then maybe the automatic update won't actually be able to finish by the time the server cuts it off. If that happens, then you might end up with one plugin updated and one plugin halfway updated and broken. And we've actually seen on hosting accounts that have extremely slow file systems for any given plugin, automatic updates can fail. Though it is still fairly rare, but it is a risk to be aware of. There's also the possibility that issues can be introduced that limit a site's functionality. Let's say you have a plugin that automatically updates for your online shopping platform, and the new version forces you to basically submit a new configuration before anyone can check out on your site. That means that your online store isn't going to be able to take payments until you reconfigure that. Now, that is fairly rare, and most plugin authors try to avoid that, but it does happen. Now, one of the other problems that can come up is it's kind of hard to tell what changed if your site broke. One of the first things you ask if anything breaks is what happened? How did this happen? And if you have multiple plugins or themes being updated at the same time, it's hard to tell which of them caused the problem. And number 4, which is also fun, is that vulnerabilities can be introduced with new features. I do actually do code review on plugin updates for our site. And I did actually find a minor vulnerability in one of the plugins that we were using, but Chloe actually found a much more severe vulnerability in the WP Discuss plugin when it introduced new functionality. Chloe, if you...
Yeah,
Hi.
so I was doing my typical reviewing of plugins, and WP Discuss did a major overhaul from version I think it was in the 5s to 7, so it was a major overhaul, and they had actually introduced an arbitrary file upload vulnerability with their major overhaul. And so that's one thing to consider when you enable automatic updates, because sometimes major overhauls can introduce new vulnerabilities. So if you have a WordPress site where you do code reviews on your plugins and themes before updating them, it's really important that you don't have auto updates on, because it can cause issues and introduce those vulnerabilities before you've gotten a chance to do that code review, and make sure that code isn't deployed onto your production sites.
Yeah, and I mean, that was a really bad vulnerability. That was like almost complete site takeover.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, unauthenticated. You could just upload files. It was pretty bad. And if
Wow.
yeah, and if hackers got their hands on that before we did, it could have been really, really bad. And if automatic updates.
Yeah, and that's not even counting the possibility of like a malicious actor, actually like buying a plugin and introducing, malicious code into the new plugin version, or like, there was a period a couple years ago where, plugin authors or the new owners of plugins would install like crypto miner code in their plugin updates, and everyone who visited your site would experience the site as being really slow, not because your site was slow, but because they were mining Bitcoins for the plugin author and not you.
Yeah.
So yeah, so many things that could go wrong. And I mean, the good news is that usually, we'll find vulnerabilities quickly and report them. The WordPress plugins team shut down plugin authors that introduce malicious code, but still there's that window of time.
Yeah, it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah. I mean, there's also the possibility that, different plugin updates could cause compatibility issues with each other, especially major version releases like, the Yoast SEO. They're awesome. We actually use them. But like during the version 14 update, they had a major change in how they stored information in the database, and it took a bunch of, emergency bug fixes in order to get it to a place where it wasn't causing issues for certain sites. And they have a fairly rigorous QA process. So like even for like a large trusted plugin where they do a lot of testing, there's just so many different site configurations out there that it's impossible to test all of them. And like I said, QA resources do vary among plugins. We do a lot of testing on our plugin before we release it. Yoast does a lot of testing on their plugin before they release it. But a lot of smaller plugins, they don't have a QA team. They have the same guy who's developing the plugin doing QA on the site. And I mean, they say never QA your own software. It's like editing your own writing. Hire an editor, hire a QA guy, and it matters. And then finally, WordPress doesn't really have a way to do canary testing. It doesn't. Basically, canary testing is where you roll out a very small number of you roll out the beta of a plugin, the test version, to a very small number of users sort of automatically who've signed up for that. And that way you can see if there's issues going on. And the automatic update feature doesn't currently have a provision for that, or for any sort of like fine-grained control over which versions to update. Like if you could choose to only auto update on security patches, that would be amazing. But right now there's no way to differentiate between auto updates on security patches and major version updates. So we have a question from David Turner, which is, I wonder how auto update will work when sites are installed via Oculus and has auto updates configured there as well. And to tell you the truth, there might be conflicts, especially if both auto updates attempt to run at the same time. Now, we did some fairly extensive testing with our own plugin, which has its own built-in auto update, just to make sure that it didn't cause issues with the WordPress auto update system. But we can't necessarily say that that's the case for all third-party auto updating systems. Anyways, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. It's still probably worth it, but I think it's probably time for me to hand it over to Scott for our coffee break.
Yeah, we that was a good question that we saw there. Now, as far as our plugin, like if we had the auto update enabled in Wordfence, and the it was also enabled from the 5.5 plugins area, would it depend on which cron ran first there, Ram? Do you know as far as that?
Effectively, whichever cron runs first is the one that's going to update the plugin. So the main danger happens if both updates are scheduled on the same cron job. And as I mentioned, that can be more of a problem, mostly because cron jobs in WordPress, they're not like Linux cron jobs where it keeps a constant watch. They're triggered whenever there's a request to the site. So if your site gets no traffic for like 15 hours, you could have multiple cron jobs that were scheduled for. You could have the last 3 cron jobs running at once, basically, in rapid succession, at least.
Okay. Yeah, we had some other good questions. I noticed just in relation to using cache with the lazy load feature that's going to be in there by default. And that's something personally, I think is going to just need to be tested depending on the cache you're using. I believe somebody had mentioned Lightspeed, I want to say. So that's difficult to answer, I think, right now. Do you have any input on that, Ram, how that would affect the lazy load? I know you can disable the lazy load, and I was reading through the documentation during that last segment, just seeing how that interacts with different plugins. And I didn't see anything conclusive there. So that's going to be something that might need to be tested.
I really don't foresee a lot of problems since lazy loading is largely taken care of by JavaScript. And caching should just make it load faster, but you can't rule out the possibility. Especially with things like Lightspeed, anything that uses different I want to say clever tricks in order to speed up sites can occasionally run into incompatibilities. And caching is, as always, if anything is weird on your site, purge your cache first before almost anything else to make sure that that's not what's causing the problem.
Yeah, and as far as we had a question from Scott about using lazy load rather with different other plugins that have similar functionality, I think that's just going to be something you're going to want to test each one to see which one works better on your site. I did see in the field guide there that Safari is it's coming soon as far as compatibility there, so that will be nice to see. But yeah, keep the questions coming in, and we'll take a look and see what we have. Now, Chloe is going to go over some more and how these are going to, your site can be affected by the updates here in just a moment. But first, we always like to take a moment to thank our premium subscribers on Office Hours because, as I mentioned early on, without the ability to get out right now to WordCamps, this is the next best thing for us, and we love interacting with everybody, and we always appreciate seeing a couple hundred people here in the YouTube chat before we go live. And thanks to Tim Cantrell and Mark Maunder over there for hanging out and interacting with them before we go live. And like I said, we love getting your questions and spending time with you here. So we appreciate it. Our premium subscribers make this possible. It also makes what Chloe and Ram do possible, and the rest of our threat intel team, because they spend a good bit of time, either going off of tips or information that there may be a vulnerability in a plugin, or just kind of freestyling it themselves and looking through plugins and finding these vulnerabilities. They might get a tip that there's an issue in a plugin, and then once they dive in, there may be 2 or 3 other more severe issues. And we had that happen recently, and you can check that out on I believe it was our last episode of Office Hours. So they do a lot of good work like that, and they benefit our premium customers as well, getting those premium firewall rules out immediately. And a lot of the times when you read these blog posts, Chloe and Ram and the rest of the threat intel team are getting these firewall rules built and put out, sometimes the same day, sometimes within a few days of finding these issues. And there's occasions where our firewall is already protecting against, what we are finding. So there's a lot of value in the firewall, whether you're using free or premium. Now, I am going to go over the benefits of premium just very briefly. So if you're interested in supporting Wordfence, you can do that in a few ways. One of them is purchasing a premium license, and that is $99 for one site. And that also covers a staging site as well. So if you have a test or a staging site that you use, that premium license will also cover that. Now, if you maybe are considering a site cleaning or a site audit, and those are excellent options, normally priced at $179, but they also include the $99 license, which is a 1-year license with it that will cover your staging sites as well. And what you get with the audit or the cleaning is one of our site cleaning analysts who goes through and looks through all the files in the database and makes sure that there is nothing on there as far as malware, no compromises. We look through the comments and the posts and the database and clean everything out. So we do that with both the audit and the cleaning. If we find that there's malware on your site during an audit, and the audit is a 60-point inspection that we do, and we send you a report over to give you an idea of your security standing. And you don't have to be hacked to do that. An audit's a good thing to just do if you need the peace of mind. But if we do find something in there, we switch you over to a site cleaning at no additional charge at that point, and we clean out the entire site. Both of those come with a premium license as well as a 90-day guarantee that you're not going to experience another compromise. And if you do, we will go back in and clean that compromise out for you in those 90 days. You can also support Wordfence by hitting the like button below this video and let us know that you're enjoying these streams. You can subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, and that'll let you know when we go live. Sometimes we post some walkthroughs and some different setup guides on the YouTube channel. And if you check those out, you'll see Kathy narrates those and helps you get things set up and get the most out of Wordfence. And other notifications that you would get would be when we go live for office hours. Now, we don't post a bunch on YouTube, so you're not going to get overwhelmed there. Now, as I mentioned, let's take a quick look at the premium features that you're getting. First off, the real-time IP blacklist. If you join premium, you get your license code, you paste that in the all options area of Wordfence, and you're then protected by the blacklist. And the blacklist is automatically populated by us, and you do not need to do anything to activate it or maintain it or change anything. It's one of those good things, if you make a lot of blocks on your site, if you find yourself in live traffic very frequently, and you're having to go through your list of the blocks and deciding what to unblock because you haven't seen any hits on that from that IP, that's where the blacklist comes in. It automatically does it for you. The worst IPs on the web that are hitting WordPress, Wordfence sites, they're automatically blocked and they can't interact with your site at all. So if you're currently using Premium, you can check out the live traffic area and filter the traffic by blocked and blocked by firewall, and take a look in there what you see with the real-time IP blacklist. If you have the email alerts on, you may have seen at times the increased attack rate, and that is likely due to the real-time blacklist making a difference there. I brought up malware signatures and firewall rules for premium user. These are immediately sent out as soon as we have them ready, and as soon as we release them, your cron will update that on your site and get you protected from anything new that's out there being exploited. So that's another one that you just don't have to do anything. It's protection that's there for you, and the threat intel team is doing the work there to keep these 3+ million sites safe, and it's an awesome feature that you don't have to worry about. Country blocking, another good one. This allows you to block either the entire site or just the login form, or both. and from any countries that you select. I know me, typically, whenever I create a new site, whether it's a test site or just a little hobby site, I'll block the login from all countries except my own for just the login form. And that really cuts down on what you're going to see as far as your brute force. So anybody who would be getting locked out at that point would be coming from my own country. And it just makes it a little easier to take a look at. Otherwise, if you're running a big site and you're seeing a ton of lockouts, maybe you don't need to see all those. You can narrow it down with country blocking at that point. Scan scheduling, also a premium feature. It allows you to set exactly when and how often your scans go. If you always log into your site at a certain time of the day, and that's something that Chloe's going to talk about here in a moment, how often are you checking on your site? This scan scheduling feature ties into that. You can set it an hour before you log in. That way you have your whole scan right in front of you. Maybe it found nothing. Maybe there's a couple little things you got to take a look at. If you don't have the auto updates enabled, then this scan scheduling can help you for when you log in. You'll see you have 3 plugins ready to be updated. You can decide what you want to do with those and do them manually. Last not least, premium support. If you've written into premium support, you may have talked to myself or Tim in the chat. We're happy to help. We love providing you with direction, keeping the sites secure as possible, and giving you a hand. So if you have any questions and you're using premium, right into the ticketing queue, and we'll be happy to help. If you have any questions at all about those features or anything that we've talked about at this point, you can write into feedback@wordfence.com and use the subject line Wordfence Office Hours. So I think that brings us to what we have teased a little earlier, and I think Chloe's going to let us know how we should be approaching these new auto updates and the new feature that's added in 5.5. And we're going to base this on what kind of site that you're running. Is that right, Chloe?
Yep, that's correct. So before we dive into it, I just kind of wanted to mention that we're going to be taking a look at this from a risk standpoint. So with each persona, with each WordPress site, there's going to be a different level of risk tolerance. So a hobbyist or a blogger might have a much higher risk tolerance because there's not much on the line for you to lose. Whereas an enterprise, there might be a much lower risk tolerance, and you want to mitigate as much of the risk from enabling auto updates as you possibly can, so that you don't affect your business, your customers, and things like that. And the next thing I wanted to talk to you about a little bit is the important security aspect of auto updates is that it has the potential to affect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of your site. This is something in the security world that we refer to as the CIA triad. And it's basically the key things that you're trying to do when it comes to the security of your site. So you're trying to protect the confidentiality of the information on your site, the integrity of the information, and the availability of that information on your site. I want to say that the biggest threat to enabling auto updates would be a loss of availability in the context of most general WordPress sites. So with that being said, let's take a look at hobbyist sites, e-commerce, enterprise, and what actions you should take and if you should enable auto updates for your site based on that persona. So the first one I want to cover is going to be hobbyist blogger sites. So basically these are sites where you just use it to get your information out to the world. You just blog, it's fun, it's informational, there's not much writing on it. You don't have any income from it coming in from it. Maybe you check on it once every couple months, once every couple weeks, or you update it every day if you're a blogger and you like to do that. But generally speaking, you don't update often because it's just not something you pay attention to. So I personally have my own personal site, and this is going to sound terrible coming from me, but I take forever to update my plugins. But I only have a couple running, and I'm pretty confident that nothing bad's going to happen. But if it does, I have a pretty high risk tolerance, so I don't really mind if something happens, and I can deal with it when it does happen. So for someone like me or someone that has a blog, we would recommend enabling auto updates for all your plugins just to have that happening in the background, because you're not doing it as often as maybe some of the other WordPress based sites out there. And you don't have, so it's probably more important for you that your site doesn't get compromised than it is to lose availability, because if your site gets compromised, then you have to deal with getting it fixed, and maybe possibly paying for that if you don't have the experience to fix it yourself. So you might be out of pocket $170 or more to get that fixed. So whereas if an auto update broke your site, you hopefully have a backup and you can just restore it real quick. So that's one of the things to consider, and that's why we would recommend enabling auto updates to help keep your site secure. And we just think that's more of an important risk than your site breaking, and might differ, but that's just generally speaking. The next thing I want to talk about is small business brochureware sites. So that might be like you just have a marketing landing page for, let's say, your restaurant. So you have a restaurant and you have a site for your restaurant that has your menu. Maybe it has a couple deals on it, like show us your coupon, but you don't have like anything else kind of going on. It's just there for marketing purposes. And so in that case, we also want to recommend enabling auto updates, because again, you might not be checking those updates as frequently. There's not much to lose. There's not as much to lose with the availability of your data or your site, whereas it getting compromised could have much more significant impact. So having those auto updates on to get those security updates to you as quick as possible is the most important action to take for those types of sites. And then from there, we have small business, e-commerce. So your site, you rely on it for income. So let's say Sally's Cat Blog decided to start selling cat toys. That income coming from those cat toys that she's selling is very important. She needs that to go day to day and pay her bills. So if her site went down or and she stopped losing sales during that period of time because an auto update temporarily disabled something on her site and people weren't able to check out, she could have a lot of issues there. So in this situation, we recommend enabling auto updates on some plugins. So for example, if you're running WooCommerce to power your store, you might not want to enable auto updates on that plugin, because that has a significant impact on the availability of people being able to purchase your products. Whereas if you have a back-end plugin that isn't going to be front-facing or affect the sales of your product, you might want to enable that just to keep that up to date, and you don't have any issues with security vulnerabilities in those plugins, and it generally won't affect your bottom line and people being able to access your site and make those purchases. From there, there is an agency persona. So basically, you might manage multiple sites for clients. You maybe run multiple businesses. For this persona, we recommend not enabling auto updates at all, because it could pose a significant risk to your business. If you have a client and you enable auto updates on all their plugins and one day it breaks and your client comes at you, they're very angry because you've broken their site due to an auto update, you might end up losing that customer. So at the end of the day, you might be losing that business, which is really important to your WordPress business and your day-to-day being able to pay bills, being able to pay your employees, and continuing to get that business from your customers. So we recommend continuing to maybe test those updates beforehand on a development site before pushing those to production sites. So you wouldn't want to enable auto updates for those plugins. And then after that, we have agencies. So this is going to be our enterprise, sorry. We have enterprise after that. And so that's going to be like wordfence.com, wordpress.com, other plugins that have huge enterprise, multiple teams, the whole thing. They likely have security policies and procedures in place to make sure that they're at the top of security, that they can make sure that everything's good. They likely do code reviews prior to pushing updates, so they don't introduce any new vulnerabilities. and things like that. So in that situation, we also want to recommend not enabling auto updates, because it could have a really significant impact on your customers being able to access your site, get support, you making money. Your site could go off for a couple hours because of an auto update. So it's just better to keep your policies and procedures in place and continue to do that rigorous testing and making sure that you don't introduce any new vulnerabilities or make your site go offline due to an auto update. So just continue not using auto updates for those clients or for that persona. And then with all that being said, in all these situations, you should always have backups enabled if you're going to enable auto updates. It's very important, because if an auto update does break your site, you will have a backup ready to go so that you can restore your site and get it back to working function. How often you do this is going to depend on how often your site is updated. So if you're the hobbyist, you don't update your site for months at a time. So maybe every week instead of every day. And this is all going to depend on your different environment. If you're enterprise, you might want to do backups a lot more often, maybe every day, every hour. It depends on how many transactions are happening and what's going on with your WordPress site. And with all of that being said, we don't recommend enabling auto updates just yet. Just wait a couple weeks and see if there's any bugs that are fixed within the auto update feature. Because if you do want to enable it and you enable it now, there's a potential for things to go wrong. So just wait and let it ride out just a little bit and see if anything gets patched or fixed or things like that. And if everything's all good in a couple weeks and there hasn't been any major fixes to it, then it's pretty safe to start enabling those auto updates on your site if it works for your persona.
All right, that was excellent. That covers the automatic update, I think. Now, where did Sally's cat blog fall into there? I'm guessing it was down towards the hobby sites, right?
Yeah, so right now, Sally's cat blog is probably Hobbyist. She just kind of posts cat pictures. But if she decided to sell cat toys, she might move up to the e-commerce tier. So that could change with how her site changes and evolves.
Maybe we should consider that for a future office hours segment. We need to get Sally's cat blog, I think, maybe selling some catnip or some toys or something.
I think cats of the world would love that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I'm looking, I don't see any questions right now. Anything that you want to add, Ram, if you're over there, or Chloe, anything you thought of along the way? Any additional notes for auto update?
I do actually, and it's something that I probably should have covered earlier, but basically that there is one major distinction between an automatic update and a manual update, and that's basically that a manual update is supervised. Like if you're manually updating a plugin or theme, you're on your site right there and then, you click the update button, or, you know, if it's a premium plugin or theme, you might have to disable, delete, manually upload, and activate the new plugin or theme. But most premium plugins or themes are better than that these days. But you're there on the site and you can see if something goes wrong at that moment. And that's basically a supervised update is going to be lower risk because you can respond to it immediately. Any unsupervised update, you have to depend on your site sending you an email that you might or might not get.
Now, you may have covered it earlier. Have you seen with 5.5 and the auto update feature how that affects premium plugin updates? Is there the ability to turn that on for those from what you've seen so far?
So far, I haven't seen a premium plugin or theme that hooks into that system. I do know that there are premiums and themes that hook up into the update system, so it should be possible. I just haven't seen any of them do it yet. For the time being, I think it might be best to manually update those, just because unless they claim to have done some fairly extensive testing, it's probably safest to manually update those going forwards, at least until the feature has all the bugs worked out. Like I said, this is a new feature. It might even take a few weeks or a few minor releases for all the bugs to get worked out just in WordPress core from the auto update functionality. So hold off for a couple weeks probably.
Yeah. All right. Well, I see we just have a couple minutes left here, so I'm going to wrap it up for the time being. But before we go, again, we want to thank you for coming and participating in office hours and sharing your questions. If you still have questions, definitely feel free to send those in at feedback@wordfence.com, and you can use the subject line Wordfence Office Hours. Again, if you found this to be helpful, go ahead, hit the like button underneath the video, and let us know that you're enjoying this and you want more of this kind of content. If you have any suggestions, you can use the email that I had mentioned, and send them in, and we'll be happy to take a look, and it may be something we cover going forward. We're going to be looking at some new vulnerabilities within the next week or two, and showing you those as we have done in the past, so you can keep an eye out for that. We got live events coming out often, so if you hit the subscribe button and the bell, you'll get notifications when we go live with those. And we go live for office hours on Tuesdays at noon Eastern. That's 9 a.m. Pacific. You can check out our mailing list, where you're going to get news first about what Ram and Chloe and the rest of our team are finding in these plugins. And that's at the bottom of the wordfence.com site. In the footer, you'll see a link there. Also, you'll see the Think Like a Hacker podcast, which is produced by the wonderful team here at Wordfence, and we do that weekly as well. Typically, we've been posting that on Friday, and we've been going between 8 and 10 minutes. So if you got a 10-minute drive to work or anything and you want to catch up on some news, that's an easy way to do it, and it's on Spotify as well. Again, we want to say thanks to our premium customers. Like I said, this wouldn't be possible without you, and our premium features that we offer, wouldn't be possible either. So if you want to support Wordfence, you have the premium licenses that you can buy. You can get discounts on those premium licenses if you want to buy more than one. And you can check out our pricing page for that. You can search that right on our site, or we'll link to it in the chat here in a moment. What you do there is, if you buy more than one license, you're going to get discounts on them. Or instead, you can buy one license for multiple years and get discounts that way as well. Wordfence Central, check that out. If you have multiple sites that you're using Wordfence on, it's a free tool to use, wordfence.com/central. You can add your sites there, whether they're free or premium. It's a great place to just keep an eye on all of your sites and their security. You can run scans and change templates. If you have a site, maybe you're hosted somewhere where you're having issues with a scan and you had to set it up specifically for that site. If you have other sites on the server, you can just push that template out to all of them, and you'll be good to go from there. It's a cool place to keep an eye on your sites. One place, you don't need to log into each individually. Also, fasterslow.com. It's a global performance monitoring solution that we have designed. You can check your website and get reports on important factors for your visitors' experience on your website. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go to fastorslow.com, put your site in, and get a good idea of what your visitors are experiencing as far as speed on your site. Also, open.film, on the topic of WordCamps, which I've brought up about a dozen times today because we miss it. Check out open.film. It is a film that Mark and Kathy and some of the team here developed, just going over the WordPress community. And there's a bunch of interviews of really cool people in there that, if you've been to WordCamps or if you're familiar with people in the WordPress community, you'll recognize them. And if you have any feedback or anything that you'd like us to cover here on Office Hours, as I mentioned, write in and we'll take a look. But until next time, we appreciate everybody stopping by and hanging out with us, and we'll be keeping an eye out for you next week. So until then, I hope everybody has a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week as well. So from everybody at Wordfence, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.